Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Dream, and you are here for the It's All Good show. The sub podcast of the It's All Good show that you're specifically here for is called Psychedelics as Medicine. And it's one of my favorite subjects. Now, for a couple of years now, tonight's guest and I have been Facebook friends. And I've known him to be very astute and able to share perspectives that get me thinking. But I had no idea of his background with psychedelics. And when I put a call out on Facebook to find people that would like to be on the show, Psychedelics is Medicine, he stepped up and he sent me his information, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is shocking that I didn't know all of this about you. I kind of feel like to become friends on Facebook, we should share bios or something, and then like if you have to check mark I read your bio, and then you guys can become friends, because I missed 2 great years of connecting on a deeper level. But anyway, all that by the wayside. My guest tonight is Guy Crittenden, and he's coming to us live from Ontario, Canada. And Guy, welcome to the It's All Good show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a bit outside of Facebook. You're almost like my brother from another mother. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. Yeah, Facebook is funny that way, as is all social media. It's a mediated relationship, and I'm this kind of connection is one of the things I'm grateful for with things like Facebook. I have lots of complaints about the digital age, but one of the nice things is meeting people that you mightn't bump into otherwise. So just to quickly bring your audience up to speed about a little bio snapshot of who I am. I grew up in Toronto, Canada, in a very comfortable middle class upbringing. But I grew up in a nice leafy middle class neighborhood. Um, but there was a lot going on in my growing up. My parents were divorced and remarried. So that always creates some interesting dynamics. My parents were all very vivid, almost larger than life people. They were all in the newspaper business. And I resisted journalism for the longest time myself. If you'd known me in my 20s, I was an artist with an art history background. I Every apartment I ever lived in, I turned into an art studio. I spent a year, for your American audience there, very well traveled in the United States. I spent a very memorable year when I was, let me see, probably about 25, 26, living in Santa Monica. I had driven across the states in a van, one of those shag and wagon kind of things, and ended up in LA, as a lot of lost souls do. And I joined an artist co-op there, and I took film. Uh, One of my neighbors in Santa Monica took me to a store called the Bodhi Tree. And I had not had much of a spiritual background. I'd had some mystical experiences, but I hadn't put it all together. And I remember back in those days, we used cassette tapes, and my van had a cassette tape player. And I used to go up and down Pacific Highway number 1 visiting friends in LA, from LA and up in San Francisco. Um, and I would listen to Alan Watts and Ram Dass. I don't think I knew Terence McKenna in those days. That came later. But that was the beginning of my introduction to what ended up becoming a life of spiritual inquiry. And then I came back to Canada, and between age 30 and 55, I was an editor I became a journalist. I went into the family business, but not newspapers. I co-founded a couple of business magazines that were edited for the environmental services industry. And I did very well there, won a lot of awards and made good money. And at age 55, I had a life-changing trip to Peru, uh, spent 10 days trekking the Amazon, kind of to celebrate 25 years in the environmental business. Amazon being the mecca of the environment movement. And while I was there, I drank ayahuasca 3 times at the Nihu Reao Spiritual Center outside of Iquitos. And that was extremely life-changing for me. Within a year, I'd left my job, and I've spent the past 10 or 11 years as a freelance writer, uh, writing online articles. I've been a contributor to a number of websites. There was a woman who left CNN after having a similar experience with ayahuasca to my own, and she started a website to which I was a regular contributor. I don't think that site is up anymore. It's very active. And in what else? 2018, I wrote a book about my experiences in Peru and drinking ayahuasca for the first 12 times. And that book is called The Year of Drinking Magic, subtitle 12 Ceremonies with the Vine of Souls. And that won the 2018 um, Independent Publishers Book Award, the silver medal in its category. So that gave me bragging rights as an author. And that book is still available on Amazon and in bookstores. So that's a little snapshot of my background and my journey. And now I live north of Toronto in a small town called Bracebridge, and I continue my freelance writing. And my wife is a Pilates instructor, and we do fun things like put on ecstatic dances every month and breath works and sound baths. We're both trained in that. And we also operate a sound frequency healing studio with a number of modalities, everything from rife frequencies on a custom made table that we created or built. And we're both trained in Reiki and all kinds of energy and shamanic healing. So there you go.
It is, it's incredible. Your story is, it doesn't surprise me that we met. It surprises me that we didn't meet sooner. There's so many similarities in our experiences and where we've ended up. And so when you reached out to me and said you'd be interested in being on the Psychedelics is Medicine podcast, um, and I read your bio, I thought, okay, so this is going to be about ayahuasca. And I know all about ayahuasca. I've done it and this and that, and down in Peru with shaman. But then you and I had a conversation recently, and I think that maybe there's a twist in where this conversation is going to go. You spoke of another plant medicine that most people, certainly I can say in the United States, don't treat it as a plant medicine.
Hmm.
And now with legalization of recreational marijuana throughout, I think 38 of the United States, I think it is. I'm not even sure, but somewhere in there, and edible. Everyone's edible, and all this, and it doesn't seem like it seems like it's taken very lightly here in the United States, and just from a very recreational, also medicinal, but certainly recreational perspective. Your perspective on it is a little more in the psychedelic realm. Will you expand upon that for us, Guy?
Well, when I got back from Peru and I worked for the first year, or actually for about the next 2 or 3 years, it was really all about Madre. It was all about the ayahuasca. And I found some local people who served it. And I went on many journeys. I'm not one of these people who's done hundreds of them, don't get me wrong. I've always used these things sparingly, but I definitely had some deep experiences of it. Many more. The book is just about when I got started, and I have to do a follow-up book about the past 10 years and all the other things that have happened. But over the years, I've worked, I've or tried at least sometimes just once, sometimes more often, things like peyote, yopo, which is an interesting DMT-rich uh, plant or tree from South America, and on and on. But what was really interesting for me was because I had childhood asthma, I could never smoke anything. I could never inhale. So I was never really drawn to using cannabis, which I always call cannabis and not marijuana, which is a slang term. My relationship with that plant is, at the risk of sounding pretentious, is extremely sacred to me. And so I have a reverence for it. I treat it as one of the great master plants. It's arguably the master plant if you look at the history of these things. Um, she would certainly tell you that. But so I'm not one to smoke cannabis. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I think what the government has done is it's opened it up because it thinks it's another casual recreational drug. And if you want to be conspiratorial, it might be part of making us all more amenable to have our lives more controlled and surveilled. I don't know. But in my own case, I was never able to smoke it. In addition to it would make me cough, it would put me right to sleep. I'd be just asleep. So I'd be on these great paddling trips out on these lakes we have up here in Muskoka, and my friends would always pass around a doob, and they'd say, "Oh, come on, Guy." It's like Mikey with the breakfast cereal. Come on, Guy, you got it. And I would always say, you know what's going to happen. And I would take one draw on it, and 5 minutes later, I'd be in my tent asleep, and I'd miss the whole evening. So anyway, my relationship with that plant changed. And I'm sharing this story because I want to share with people the potential of cannabis as a hallucinogen and a teacher plant. And for me, it is a psychedelic when I consume it orally. So the way I discovered this is kind of an interesting story. I was on a paddling trip with my brother, and this time he had some cannabis that he'd brought in an edible format, which interestingly I had never done. It had never occurred to me to do. And these things were harder to come by back in the day. Anyway, I consumed it, and we were sitting on these granite rocks on one of the big lakes up here. Beautiful environment, watching the sunset, talking about this and that. And finally, finally, this started to hit me, and my brother was nattering on about mortgage rates and 3D stuff, right? And I just finally said, Casey, I gotta go and lie down. And I went into my little wilderness tent, lay down on my sleeping bag and my thermarest. And I kid you not, as soon as my head hit the pillow, boom, this voice came through, a really strong plant medicine voice. And she said, "Finally, you found your way to me." And I had this, I didn't look, I was almost scared to, but I had this sense of this goddess standing behind me. And I knew right away that it was the spirit of cannabis. And I could sort of imagine her leaves and this sort of rustling. It was a very Carolus Castaneda novel type of experience. And she gave me a whole talk about how she'd been waiting for me. And she was so frustrated that that's why she always made me go right to sleep when I smoked it, because that's not how she was going to interact with me. And finally, I took an edible and found my way to her. And ever since that day, that plant has been my master plant. And I use other shamanic visionary plants and substances far more rarely. And this is my go-to. Now, that doesn't mean I do it every day or even every week. Actually, these most recently, I've been doing it once or twice a month in a ceremonial kind of setting. I set it up privately. I actually did this for Father's Day over the weekend. I hadn't done it in quite a while. And I sort of do it over an afternoon, an evening, a night, and into the next day because it affects me so strongly. And I get visions and I get downloads. So it's very much like ayahuasca for me, but much milder, or like mushrooms, much milder. And I still get the same quality of teachings without, the quite the dramatic, almost out of body type experiences.
This is fascinating to me. And which is probably what I said when we had this conversation the first time. But I have personally a I don't smoke anymore. I don't do edibles. It was a 45-year, 4.5 decade journey for me with the plant. I considered it medicine, but it was daily use. And it just helped me in a regular life sense. Guy, I have never heard of anyone having the type of experience that you just shared. Now, I have to ask a couple of things. When you do this multiple hour, starting in the day into the evening and then into the next day, are you having several edibles during this time?
No, I will. It's funny because my wife has used it in the way you described, and she does not regard her relationship with it as healthy, so she's trying to stay away from it. Once in a while, she'll break down, and if she's under a lot of stress, she might do it again. But she's generally trying to not use it, and she's one who would smoke it and blah blah blah. My thing is, she makes it for me out of good source material, and it ends up being kind of a paste. And I will do maybe a 1/3 of a teaspoon, maybe a heaping teaspoon, but 1/3, and that's it. And I am good to go for a good 14 to 16 hours. It sort of has an arc. It kind of peaks about half after about 5 or 6 hours, but I had to learn that there's a long sort of tailwind to it. So I've learned to not make plans to have a busy day the next day because I need to lie around. And it's not just that it makes me into a sloth, but I'm actually getting teachings because I think from my years in other practices, plus my work with some of the other master plants, my third eye if this doesn't sound pretentious. I'll just make a blanket statement now. I'm going to say a bunch of things in this talk that are pretentious sounding. Okay. I'm sorry. It's just how it is. So, these really opened up the third eye, which I associate with the pineal gland. And I think I have a very clear channel now. Doesn't make me better than anybody else. I'm not making any grandiose claims, but we do have this incredible capacity at this chakra where in India they put that dot, so it doesn't take much to nudge me into relationship with, what we used to call the cosmic consciousness. And when you're ready, I'll tell you about a couple of the downloads I got on the weekend with Father's Day because they were very special and quite interesting, and I think relevant to what's going on in the world and relatable to some of your listeners.
This is of absolute interest to me. You're reading my mind because that was going to be my next question was, would you mind sharing some of your most recent experience with us? And so you 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 were right there. It must help with the telepathy thing also. But tell us about what happened this weekend.
Um, well, it was early Saturday afternoon, excuse me, early Sunday afternoon, and I got a lot of things done that I needed to get done for the day. And I finally said, it's Father's Day. I've done my chores and I'm just going to relax. And then I realized this is the perfect day for me to do this. And that was yesterday. And today I had very empty schedule. So I knew I could just have a very chill day. So I took the medicine, took a while to come on, um, and as it usually does, and it comes on very gently. And I lay down for a while, and I was seeing very subtle but very beautiful sacred geometry patterns, very interesting three-dimensional landscapes that are not really landscapes of this world, but I do feel sometimes that I'm seeing something that exists somewhere, either in another galaxy or more likely another dimension, and a very shamanic vibe to it. And so anyway, that happened, and then I got teachings, and I had experiences and downloads. I processed some grief around some family matters pertinent to Father's Day. And then actually, it was this morning, I woke up at about 4 in the morning and I got this tremendous teaching. And you need to understand that I've been called kicking and screaming, never thought I'd go there, to this shamanic path of doing healing and shamanic type of work. Again, never planned to do it. I'm not one of these people who went to Costa Rica, learned to serve medicine and calls himself a shaman. None of that. So I'm very reluctant to even use that word because it's kind of a contaminated word. But uh, this is really kind of funny what happened. I got this whole vision of that that I've kind of graduated from Advaita Vedanta, which is something I've been studying and practicing for many years, and I'm to follow the path of the heart. And the medicine specifically said to me, and this again, it comes with this voice. It said, the archetype that you need to use as your guiding star, as your talisman, is Santa Claus. And I'm thinking, what? Santa Claus? And then it all came back to me that if I'm sure you've heard this, but your audience might want to look into this. The whole story of Santa Claus and the elves and the flying deer and the presents under the tree has been interpreted as an allegory of Siberian shamanic traditions. And the presents under the tree are thought to represent the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And that is the psychedelic in that part of the world. And so if you extrapolate from that, the elves are the self-transforming machine elves that Terence McKenna talks about, these DMT beings, and Santa. Anyway, and the presence under the tree and the flying reindeer, it's all an allegory of um, hallucinogenic experiences and shamanism. So one of the insights that came with that is that Santa Claus makes gifts for children. The children are not just literally children. The children stand for, in this interpretation, the uninitiated, the people who are not awake to their higher nature. And Santa Claus, as a shamanic figure, initiates people into the state of higher awareness with his gifts, being the mushroom and other things. So that really spoke to me because I live in the north. I have a white beard, not a big one, but I'm starting to get a bit of a belly, so maybe I could really have use this as an excuse to let go, right? And I work with teacher plants. And then the other aspect was it was Father's Day, and I was feeling a bit morose. It's not a really happy day for me because I have a strained relationship with my two sons from my first marriage. And I really got this message like, think about Santa Claus, think about all that shamanic stuff, but also think about how jolly and cheery and full of joy he is, the twinkle in the eye. Guy, cultivate that in yourself because that's something that's a gift you can offer to others and create abundance. And given all that's going on in the world with this, all this surveillance state stuff and World Economic Forum and New World Order and all that, which I don't want to dwell on, um, this is what's needed at this time. I have a role to play in spreading joy and leading people into abundance, very much by thinking of Santa Claus. So that was one download of several that I got. And it was told to me in a very, very much a medicine voice. And I was guided into that understanding. So that
Now,
was.
after these experiences, are you taking notes? Are you writing down the downloads, or what you're learning, the teachings?
Sometimes, yes. I didn't yesterday because I think the Santa Claus thing is quite easy to remember, but I will open up a file on it and start digging into it further because I'm sure that I have more to learn. Like there was a strong suggestion that there's more for me to learn. I don't know if I'm being called to actually find that specific type of mushroom and serve it. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's something about Saint Nicholas that I need to learn, and there's maybe that ties in with the Christ mythos and the idea of Buddha and Christ as they're sort of manifested through that archetype. I might have months or years of gifts that will come from that one suggestion. So that was really good. The other one was was a suggestion that as part of that, that I launch some sort of online, whether it's once a month or once a week, some sort of online Zoom call to start organizing my Facebook friends and especially those who are local to me, instead of just posting stuff and, oh, did you hear that this happened? And oh, did you hear that? Start actually working with my creating real community and turning some of these ideas into projects and organizing people and sort of taking more of a leadership role, which I will be doing. So I actually had this idea today. It's kind of a download as well to create a regular online meeting called the Clubhouse. So imagine, when you're a kid, you had like the tree house and or something like that, and the kids would hang out there. It'd be like that, and it'd just be a place to sit and talk and share, and I will guide the conversation a bit. And then that'll lead to spin-offs, probably workshops and maybe somebody will come on and they'll say, look, I'm going through a rough time. Um, I need some help. And maybe myself or someone else who's part of the group will actually offline get into a deeper conversation, la la la. So anyway, these are typical of like a lot of what I get from these experiences is actionable. Um, so um, yeah, so that was what happened yesterday and a little bit this morning.
Appreciate you sharing that with us. I think the timing of you having that experience right before this conversation with me is not the synchronicity of all that is not lost on me. So I do appreciate you sharing that. Um, so quick question here. Have you ever met anyone else who has had such profound experiences with cannabis?
I've bumped into a few online. It never really led to an ongoing interaction. I would meet them in various online forums and that. I haven't really connected with anyone in such a way that it's become like an ongoing friendship built around that, or a sort of like, okay, let's keep in touch and follow each other's journey with that particular medicine. It's been very solitary. I have a feeling that this clubhouse idea might change that. It'll create more of an opportunity for me to stay in regular connection with people around that. And by the way, anybody hearing this broadcast who has had this kind of relationship with that teacher plant, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook, as you've already heard. Um, it is something I plan to write about. I will be doing a follow-up book to the Year of Drinking Magic. Eventually, might be the Decade of Drinking Magic. I don't know. I don't know what the title will be, but I've got a lot of stories to tell, and I better get them published before, while there's time and before they start becoming distant. Um, and I, just so you know, uh, I have a background going back to my mid-20s in Zen Buddhism. I had a long period where I meditated and I was a Zen practitioner. And then and then I needed to use a thorn to remove a thorn. I'm sort of live a lot in my mind. So Advaita Vedanta was very good for me. That was the one that um, uh, uh, that's like the most famous guy right now is Muji, who teaches that one. I'm not a Muji fan. I have some problems with him. I used to like him when he was like a sassy, young, funny guy from Jamaica. Now he's sort of created a bit of a cult for himself in, I think it's Portugal, and I'm starting to get some reports that aren't good. But if you watch an episode of Muji, he engages in the classic dialectic around Advaita, where the person comes to the microphone, "Oh, Muji, I've been listening to you for years, and I still have this terrible problem of whatever it is." And then he always flips it around and says, "Who is it that's asking the question?" So it's a form of self-inquiry. Ramana Maharshi is the most famous Indian saint who represents that tradition. And there's quite a few good teachers out there. Rupert Spira, Paul Hederman, I like, Wayne Lickerman. There's quite a number of them, and they all have a different style. And so I've been involved in that for a long time and eventually realized what I'll kind of get to cut to the chase here. What you discover after you spend years engaging in this process is you learn that there's no one here. There is only what they call the witness. But the witness isn't this thing. This thing is a dreamt character appearing inside of reality. And what is reality? It's a dream that's dreaming itself. And there's no deity behind it. There's this, in a sense, from this understanding, um, all phenomena arises inside of God or Brahma. And I'm doing a really bad job explaining this, but it's like that. And so I've spent a lot of time in that tradition. Sorry, I should silence my notifications here, but I don't want to wreck my technology. Um, so that's I was a long time in that tradition, and I feel now I've not that I've completed on that, but I'm going to give that a lot less emphasis now. Now I'm on more the path of the heart, which is very much in the Ram Dass tradition, and his guru Neem Karoli Baba, who I have also received a blessing from. He died in the 1970s, long before I ever found out about him. But I had an experience of him in, we could call it the astral plane, or it was a mystical experience, and I've received his darshan or blessing um, because well, I'm going to pause for breath, let you respond. But then if you're interested, I could tell you the story. I have a very good story I could share with you. I'm really putting the bait on the hook here uh, about what I call the Kaya Ulu experience.
Okay. I really I can't go anyplace else except what you've just set up. Somewhere in here, I do want you to address how you work within the framework of archetypes in all of these experiences. So I want you to address that, but
Well,
I want to hear.
I'll address that first.
Okay.
Um, Something I work with, uh, it was based, in my opinion, partly on the chakra system. But, the chakras from the root to the crown and what each one represents. And there's the heart chakra and the solar plexus. And a lot of us are working from getting out of solar plexus into the heart and so on and so forth. There was a group of initially North Americans and Europeans who took a more scientific psychology type sociological approach to that. And they mapped it out as a system called spiral dynamics. And if you're, unfortunately, they changed the bloody colors. I wish they'd kept the same colors as the chakra system, because when I talk about going from stage orange, which is the sort of materialistic, narcissistic stage of consciousness, which applies to an individual and a whole society, which is most of what we're in, into stage green in spiral dynamics. That's the stage of the great heart opening and the first stage of enlightenment. But it's kind of a false enlightenment because it's where you think you're the one getting enlightened. So it's kind of an egoic stage. And this lead, you see a lot of it on display in things like Burning Man, okay? Um, but I wish the people whose names I can't remember who created Spiral Dynamics had kept the same damn colors as the chakra system. If, by the way, if you want to save yourself a lot of reading and just want to listen to a very good breakdown of the stages of the map of consciousness that we call spiral dynamics, I recommend Leo Gura, Gura. He has a channel called actualized.com, and he also has a YouTube channel. And on the YouTube program, he did a separate show about each stage of spiral dynamics. So if you just search for that, you'll find it, and it's very good. And I have found it very helpful. So the way one of the systems that has helped me understand where I'm at and what I'm doing in my own personal journey has been to make use of the chakra system, but I would say more for me, the spiral dynamics way of talking about it has been very, very useful. And then in terms of archetypes, of course, some of that comes from Carl Jung. I don't really approach it very academically, but I would say that it's been very helpful to me over the past decade or so to recognize the archetypes that I manifest or that are useful to me. And it's mostly been what I call the magician warrior. Now, you might find that you're the magician, that's your archetype, or the warrior, or something else, because there's lots of archetypes. But the magician warrior was very pertinent to me because, great examples are Merlin in the Arthurian legends, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda in Star Wars, and Morpheus in the Matrix trilogy or series of films. All of those are they're sort of magician wizards who live at the edge of society, very shamanic, they live in the forest and then they insert themselves into the battle at crucial times, or they're advisors to the king, this kind of stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the archetype I've been relating to over the past 10 years or so. But more recently, I've added to it the wounded healer. Uh, a lot of my own personal trauma in my life has been useful and of great value in helping me be with my healing work. And because you know, I've had suffered, as we all have, but for me, it's instead of resenting things that happened in the past, I actually have a gratitude for the way karma set up this life so that I could come into these gifts. So I've got the magician warrior, I've got the wounded healer, and now, as I alluded earlier, and I haven't figured this all out yet, this is very fresh. This whole Santa Claus thing, I think, is going to tie it all together because I'm kind of spent the past decade working through stage yellow, throat chakra, and now I'm coming into stage turquoise consciousness. I'm kind of at the gates of the third eye chakra as the place that I abide. And again, I warned you I was going to say things that sound pretentious. And then that at that place in that realm, these systems cease to be of much use. I'm putting them behind me now. And really what I need to do is focus on my kindness practice, which is just a matter of being kind to people and seeing how deep I can go with kindness. And, humility is part of that as well. So I'm consciously, I mean, I'm not sitting and meditating or things like that. It's more like every interaction that I have with every person, I'm saying to myself, was I as kind as I could have been there? And, sometimes not thinking about it, but just being it. So that's where I'm at with that.
I appreciate how you shared that, and I can't help but believe that the medicines have really allowed you a self perspective that many people don't take the reins of, and it seems like you've fully taken reins of going there and looking at yourself and just being really expansive, and maybe that's why cannabis was waiting for you and so ready for you to step into being the student, as it were. Now let's get back to that story that you wanted to take us into.
Yeah, that's actually the perfect segue now that I think of it. So what happened was this was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after, maybe less, after I got back from Peru. And I was uh, I was just in bed one night, asleep, and I was woken up by this voice that said to me, "I'm not letting you get back to sleep until you memorize these two words." It sort of happened like this is a bit of a blur because I came out of sleep, but I was hearing these words, Kaya Ulu, Kaya Ulu, and I wake up and I go, "What Kaya? Wow, wow." Kaya Ulu. Didn't know how to spell it. And I kept drifting back to sleep. And it was like 2 in the morning. And this voice kept going, no, you are not going back to sleep until you write this down. Well, I didn't have anything to write with beside the bed, which sometimes happens. So I'm sitting at the edge of the bed, like Kaya Ulu, Kaya Ulu, Kaya Ulu. Okay, finally I go back to sleep. The next morning I wake up and I'm in the shower and I'm just completely forgotten about this. And then suddenly I go, what were those words I was supposed to remember? Ubu Kaya, what? Allah Kiying. I'm walking around the bed, and I had a job in those days that I had to get to work and fight rush hour traffic, and I'm just going like, oh my God. Finally, I remembered what it was, so I took a guess at how to spell it, which I think was something like Kiai and then Ullu, Kaya Ulu. And sorry, the dog's going to bark now because there's a truck going by. Apologies. Lupo, you settle down. Um, so anyway, I went online and I was a member of this shamans group on Facebook, and I said, "What do you guys think this might mean?" So I get to work, and on my lunch break, I go online and there's a whole list of people's educated guess as what it means. And I looked at some of them. Some of them were pointing to Hindu sources, and there was some deity, and it's not, nothing really grabbed me, but there were some interesting ideas. And then someone wrote, Guy, look at how this is translated in the Hawaiian English dictionary. So I go to the online Hawaiian English dictionary and I type it in just like I had guessed. And you know what it meant? Community of God. And I thought, that's it. I didn't know exactly how it would fit in with my life, but it just felt right to me. Well, over the years, what happened in the subsequently is I was in the middle of doing a much deeper dive into Ram Dass's teachings and his recorded talks. And Ram Dass lived in Hawaii. And I realized, oh, maybe my spiritual community is in Hawaii. But I never acted on it. I kind of regret it. I think I should have flown there and tried to meet Ram Dass, who I think was still alive at that time. In fact, I know he was. But I didn't. But anyway, it stuck with me. And then eventually, to give away the punchline, eventually I met Ram Dass's teacher, named Kuroli Baba, nicknamed Maharaji, not the only Indian saint with that nickname, by the way. And and that became a foundational part of my path and my spirituality. And that's where just this weekend I was reminded, get back on that path of the heart, which is what Ram Dass taught, and which is what his guru and teacher, named Karoli Baba, represented. It was the path of the heart. And I've read like 7 biographies now of Neem Karoli Baba, and my favorite has a picture of him on the cover holding a rose. Um, and so uh, I guess I'll just finish that story of going from Kaya Ulu to where it ended. Um, a couple of years ago, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I were at a yoga studio, and some friends of ours who perform kirtan were putting on a music performance, and it involved some kirtan, but one of them plays sitar and the other plays didge, and they're really great musicians. And we're at this kind of spiritual music concert. And I was sitting there, on a yoga mat, and this will be the most new age story you'll hear for a while, I'm sure. And I sensed I cannot describe it. I sensed Neem Karoli Baba standing in front of me. Now, if you ever want to know what you will do if you ever come face to face with a true Indian saint, not a phony, but the real deal, highest level stage choral consciousness, ascended master, whatever you want to call it. It's really God in a human form. Boom, I went right down. I just flung myself forward, full prostration lying on the ground. Not a second's thought. I didn't even think, oh, it's Neem Karoli Baba. No, I just, he appeared, I went down. And I just felt I received his presence and this blessing. Nobody around me knew what the heck was going on. I don't think anyone else saw him. And I didn't visually see him. I just felt the presence. And I knew it. I knew that I had received his blessing. And then that led to other mystical experiences. And I've subsequently found out that there's quite a few people, in fact, I think there's even a book about it, of people who have met Neem Karoli Baba since he died in similar ways to what I just described. And of course, it opens up all sorts of ontological questions. If you reach this certain level of consciousness and frequency vibration, do you somehow become immortal? Are you risen in your Merkaba and you're hanging out in some other plane? And can you then come back into this dimension? I really don't know. But I'm just genuinely reporting to you something that happened to me. And that gave me a sense of completion on realizing, okay, I'm now a member of this community of God that was the same family spiritually as Ram Dass.
Beautiful. I thank you for sharing that with us. Now, in our offline conversation, you mentioned a plant teacher that I had never heard of, and I researched it right away because as the way you described it, I was like, that's something that felt good to me. Talk to us about Bobasana.
Yeah, Bobinsana, so it's Bobinsana, Bobinsana. And folks can look that up. It's a shrub tree. My wife and I, during the lockdowns, hung out in Mexico for a year and a half. And we used to see this tree all the time, but we had no idea what it was. And what's notable about it, the tree's nothing special. It's just a little sapling kind of tree, but it has these spectacular flowers that are usually white and pink and purple. And they have these sort of rubbery fronds, almost like a sponge kind of a thing. And they really look like something out of Dr. Seuss. And Vanessa and I used to always marvel at these, and sometimes they drop off, and you'd pick them up and look at them. Anyway, that's Bobinsana. The the medicine that is made from Bobinsana is made from the bark of the tree that gets processed in a way that would be, they make a tincture. It's a little bit similar to how you make ayahuasca. And and then you can also make a tincture from the flower. You can mix those together. You can have them separately. I haven't worked with it long enough to tell you what all the possibilities are of all those combinations. But how I found out about it and experienced it the first time was a friend of mine who I've sat with more than anyone else, who serves ayahuasca and lived in Canada, moved recently to Costa Rica, where she works up in the mountains now, hosting retreats. And she she needed help with transporting her animals when she moved there because she had um, dogs and a cat and all this. So I was responsible for one of the dogs and we got them down there. While I was there, there was a young woman who's very trained in Bobinsana, and I had the opportunity to sit with her, and I had like a day long and into the night uh, little retreat with that medicine. And it was really wonderful. And it's so much where, given everything I've told you, with the path of the heart, Bobansana is, first of all, it's not a psychedelic at least in the traditional sense. So it's not like taking mushrooms or anything. It's a heart opening medicine. Very much so. And it's a dream stimulant. So if you work with the tincture or if you drink the bark, usually you'll mix it at a dilution in water and drink lots of the sort of tea during the day. What's going to happen is that night you're going to, or for nights, for days after, you're going to have crazy dreams and dreams that have a lot of archetypal significance. And I can't describe it, but the heart opening aspect was, I don't know. I don't know how it was. Your heart gets open. What can I say? You get a preview of what it would like to be a living saint. I mean, with the deepest compassion. It's just a marvelous plant, and it's not very well known in North America, although it's starting to be discovered. My wife and I are bringing it in, and we're kind of keeping it on the lowdown because in Canada, the Canadian government has this new bill where they're really in the pocket of the big pharma, and the government's going after a lot of alternative therapies and plant medicines and stuff. So we're not trying to not draw too much attention to it. It's fine on the show. Um, but we're planning to serve it to people. And what I like about it is you get a lot of the heart opening and the teachings, kind of like what I get with cannabis from this plant, but it's not an ordeal medicine. You're not throwing up or, you know, a night with ayahuasca is, you know, it's not for everybody. Let's put it this way.
Right.
I would have far fewer cautions about Bobensan. I mean, I'm not saying there are none. You need to do a little research. It does affect you, but it's very subtle.
Well, I appreciate our conversation about that, and I immediately did a internet search, and there's great information out there, and I was able to pick up the tincture for Stephanie and I to work with sometime soon. And you better believe that I will be reaching out to you after that and talking about sharing my experiences with you.
Yeah, I'd
Now,
love to. I'd love to hear about it and compare notes.
yeah, it's exciting. Um, Guy, I think it would be an understatement to say that we're living through some pretty chaotic times right now. Uh, and I just wanted to ask, how have the plant medicines helped you personally maybe not get so caught up in everything that's happening in our 3D world of politics and manipulation and everything like that? Or I mean, you seem so, maybe it's just the Zen teachings and your background and everything else. You seem so very calm and balanced. Maybe that's just because you're on the It's All Good show. I don't think so.
Oh, it's because
Uh,
I'm a living saint. Come on.
that's where I was leading you to say that. What a great setup. No, so speak to me just a little bit about how you do keep your balance and everything. These are chaotic times, and the division. Um, I know that it's very similar in Canada as it is in the United States, and we have a lot of the same issues with big pharma and control tactics and all sorts of things. How do you handle all that?
Well, I'm very grateful for the shamanic understanding of the world, as I would call it, which is very consistent with most of the major schools of those spiritual traditions that tend to nudge us into understanding that we are an appearance inside, you know, this dreamt reality, and ultimately there's not actually a physical world. Um, so I mean, I'm as black-pilled as it gets in terms of what's going on in the world. I do keep my finger on the pulse of, I mean, as we're sitting here, we don't know what the events in the Middle East are going to lead to, and it could, they're talking about World War III and things like that. Um, Again, going back to that warrior magician archetype and the wounded healer. I just view it as my existential duty to be to help build the new society, which has to begin on a different foundation of consciousness than the one that led to the one that we're in right now. And if we don't, to sound like a Grateful Dead person, if we don't raise our vibration and our frequency, it's the only way, really. Uh, we're not going to win this by going on Facebook and arguing with people as to whether there's a virus or there's no virus, or whether this or that political leader is going to lead us out of the situation we're in. We have to collectively start to do deep work and do the inner work. And this is why, like Terence, like in my view, Terence McKenna was a modern day Jeremiah. He was a modern day prophet. And he wrote this fabulous book that we should all read or reread called The Archaic Revival. And of all of Terence McKenna's books, the Archaic Revival to me is like a manifesto for what we need in this time. And he explains in that book um, a lot of why the Woodstock generation came to be and why people started getting tattoos. Like I have this big snake on my arm, and why people started engaging in piercings. And it's a very interesting sort of comment on what we might call pop culture, but it's much deeper than that. And it gives us a bit of a recipe for how to move forward and build the new society. So I'm doing my part. When I was in college, I was an English major, and one of my favorite books was Albert Camus' book La Peste, The Plague, which is an interesting book to think about in light of what's happened in the past 5 years. Everyone knows of L'étranger, The Stranger, which is the story of a young man who kills someone for no apparent reason. And it's about the absurdity of the human condition. But not as many people know about Camus' later work, where he was more mature, and he describes the story of a town. It's a modern town, but it's in one of those walled medieval cities they have in Europe. And so the people inside the town of the plague has broken out. And so through the whole book, his friends, this doctor's friends on the outside are trying to help get him out. So the day comes where they're going to smuggle him out through some tunnel, and he chooses to stay even though his life is at risk because he realizes, you know, he's a doctor and his purpose in life is to help people. So he's not going to work on saving his own hide. He's going to stay. And it's just Albert Camus, I think, his best expression of the existential stance, and that's what I try to remind myself of. It's not about saving myself or figuring out where I can run to escape what's coming with this surveillance state. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to, you know, raise the frequency as high as I can and help as many people as I can, follow the path of the heart, and be of service, full stop. And whatever happens, happens, and I'm okay with it. And sorry, I'm not trying to paint myself as a hero. It's like I'm leading from the back of the parade. I don't see myself in the front with of the march. I'm the guy in the back with the broom sweeping up the elephant shit.
I have to say, I knew that I would love this conversation with you. Uh, I find you to be incredibly inspiring. I look forward to
Make
the
it fun.
opportunity for myself and Stephanie to meet you and Vanessa one day. I look forward to experiencing your Rife inspired healing table and be there for an ecstatic dance and maybe a afternoon and evening of sitting with some nice medicine. I'm grateful that to meet another person, and I'm not saying another person in addition to myself. I just have been incredibly blessed in the people I've been able to meet in life, to meet another person that has taken up the challenge, as it were, the responsibility of what it means to be, in my mind, human at the highest level. And don't let it go to your head, God. But I see that in you, and this is exactly what I wanted to bring out in this conversation. There's no question that we didn't even scratch the surface of who you truly are and what you have to share. But I'm hoping that the people that watch this will be given enough of the inspiration and the medicine, as it were, that you carry just in the way that you live your life and in your perspective, that it can plant some seeds and open up some different perspectives for people and create a shift. And I know that's what it's done for me. I want to thank you very much for being on the It's All Good show. Psychedelics is medicine. It means a lot that you stepped up, and it means even more that we were able to bring this all together in this conversation today. I will look forward to your decade book on the vine and anything else that you're going to be writing and putting out there. And I look forward to being invited to the clubhouse. I want everyone to know that wherever we post this, there will be links where people can reach out and connect with you. And from my heart, and it is my heart that you've touched so brilliantly. I thank you and look forward to more. You've left me wanting more, Guy. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't know really how to respond to that other than to say to people in the audience, everything I've described today is available to every one of you. And I'm not special in any way. Everything I've described is available to everyone, and you're not alone. And there's all I can say is find community. You don't necessarily have to work with psychedelic plants, but there are some beautiful spiritual traditions that we can tap into at these times. And even if you identify as a Christian, there's a way of thinking of the story of Jesus Christ in a way that resonates very well with the kind of stories of healing and self-actualization that we've been talking about today. So thank you for your kindness, brother, and your kind words. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just want to put in one last thing. It's a favorite perspective of mine at the moment, and that is there's only one of us here, and I'm glad that it's us. And thank you for your time today. And I look forward to our next conversation.